In this video, we are talking about Disney's board battle with Nelson Peltz, Bob Iger. There is all kinds of stuff going on. Disney responded today. We're going to go point by point in regards to their response, discuss all of this up next with special guest, Mr. Matthew Murr. Welcome aboard to another episode of OG55. We're talking all about the board battle with Peltz and the Triangle Group. Crazy developments today. We're going to discuss all of it, but before we do that, I want to introduce my fantastic panel. Down below, we have a friend of the channel, Mr. Matthew Murr, returning. Matthew, welcome back, my friend.
Thank you, OG.
We love you, Matthew. It's always a pleasure having you join us all the way from the UK. I will be linking your Twitter down in the show notes. Everybody should
because it's quite a lengthy one.
It is. So it'll be linked down below. You should definitely follow him on Twitter. Matthew is a very passionate Disney fan and really love his insight in regards to everything Walt Disney Company. He is fantastic. Matthew, again, thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely.
And we have Mr. Vash Sky, producer Dre, the lawyer of all lawyers, the DA. The doctor is ready to operate. Here he is. Dre, welcome back.
Thank you, OG. Just want to clarify. Do not have a legal degree of any kind. Do not have a license at all. Not a lawyer. Okay, not representing one at all. But hey, you know what? The title I think is it's nice. But anyway, so. This is very fascinating, OG. There's these developments that have come as a result of the trading on the stock market having resumed today. Obviously, yesterday was MLK Day, so they were down. But now, with everything open, well, now the fireworks are starting to pop off. So this is going to be very interesting. Real quickly here, if you want to go ahead and follow me, you can go do so right down there at Vashguy. Go ahead and type that in and pop that in for all the, as Christine Wastelands McCarthy would say, for all the robust discussion. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be the channel to watch right now at OG55. Freshly squeezed, your source for juice, news, and info, squeezed fresh, right from the Grove. Okay, so we got a lot to get into here, OG. I think we should definitely do this here.
Let's dive right in. So Disney responded, to this Peltz kind of, what do you call it? I don't know if you want to call it a coup or attempt to. I don't know what it is. I don't know what
a proxy war. It's a proxy war in response to Nelson Peltz's proxy war. They outlined a whole presentation as to why shareholders shouldn't be giving their proxy vote towards the Triangle Group, Peltz, and attempting to get him on the board or change its bylaws. And I see you have one of their graphics up right here.
Yep, absolutely. So we'll go through each one. We'll kind of talk about. This is Disney's official response, by the way, which is fascinating. We'll go line by line, kind of go through them all because there's a lot of stuff here. I mean, this is interesting stuff. So It's broken down into two columns. On the left is what Nelson Peltz claims, and on the right is Disney's response. Right. So the first thing on this list is what Nelson Peltz claims is, quote, not looking to replace Bob Iger. Disney's response is Treon's view is that Mr. Iger shouldn't be back in control of the company. Dre, thoughts on this first point here?
Yeah, I mean, Treon has said that they're not looking to replace Bob Iger. Now, again, the interesting thing in here is that even if he was, would he necessarily admit it? No, he wouldn't. Right. Obviously, they're taking umbrage with that fact. And I think there is reasoning behind it. They say to Wall Street Journal, Robert Iger returns as the CEO, Chapek's ousted. Okay, so I'm going to have to read their citation here in terms of where they're getting that specific view that Treon believes that Iger shouldn't be back in control. I don't I don't remember them saying that as part of their presentation for the Restore the Magic initiative. I'll have to kind of double check that. But as far as I can tell, I think Peltz' argument is, okay, Iger's fine, keep him in place as is. However, we have to make and we have to ensure that there is some type of succession plan in place. We can't happen what happened the last time, which, hey, here are the keys, I'm going off, sayonara. That can't happen. I do think Peltz kind of has a point here.
He does in a way with that, but the problem too, though, is that you can't really lock Bob Iger into just 2 years, because we want to get this succession right. So just because it's 2-year mark doesn't mean, okay, let's wrap this up, out the door, Iger. I mean, I hope Peltz understands that if it takes 3 years and Iger's still there for 3 and extends it, that has to be okay. We have to get it right, and that's more important than Iger leaving at the 2-year mark. But in my opinion, but what do you think, Mr. Matthew Murr?
I honestly think Peltz's claims are just insane. I actually think Disney is right to try and defend itself, because they know that the company is already woken up under Bob Iger. And Eddie knows it. The best thing it can do right now is just stick to its guns and increase the value in its existing assets rather than trying to sell anything off.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why, like Dan Loeb, for example, it's interesting that you would say those things, Matthew, because I think Dan Loeb's, as an activist investor who also made moves towards Disney, I think that's why, nobody really took him quite as serious, because the first thing he was looking at is, well, we got to spin this off, sell this, sell that. We gotta get the financial balance sheet in order. And it's like, yeah, you could, but, and when they explained their case to him, he was like, oh, okay, well, I guess we're fine. It's like, whatever. That was a little strange. To the Trian Group's and Nelson Peltz's credit, they're not looking to spin off anything unless it actually, unless they can actually succeed in their ventures. For example, like Hulu, should we spin it off if we can't actually buy it for a reasonable price from Comcast? It's an interesting argument, simply because you're in an arms race and you're getting deeper and deeper into it, and there is a projection of profitability by 2024, but again, we've seen how these projections actually turn out from the Walt Disney Company as of recently. Can we actually hit those projections? It's an open question, because and this is kind of, the argument working against Peltz. To be honest here, he hasn't really dealt with a media company, hasn't really dealt with streaming. He says it's, I think we talked about this in the last show. It's like, I don't know if anybody's successful in the streaming venture. So, how different is, what does Peltz bring to the equation that's different from what the company's already doing? That's a very, very open question. So there's a lot to parse through here for sure. But I think this brings us on to our next point, OG. On
absolutely.
This graph here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also do want to say real quick too, the only kind of big media experience that he has is with Comcast. And I'll be real, I don't trust CEO Brian Roberts as far as I can fucking throw him. And he's had a chip on his shoulder with Disney since he failed at the takeover in 2004, 2005. Right. It does make me uncomfortable that he's worked with Brian Roberts in the past, and Ike Perlmutter, who's also not exactly a friend of the Walt Disney Company. These associations give me pause in regards to Mr. Peltz's motivations. I'm not adverse to altering, and I've said this before, I'm not adverse to an outside opinion coming in. I think that can be good if that person has a genuine interest in bettering the company. I'm just not sure Peltz is in that. I'm not sure that's where Peltz is coming from. I don't know for sure. I just have doubts. That's all I'm saying.
there are definitely associations with people who have a chip on their shoulder, directed not towards just the company, but towards Bob Iger directly.
Right.
Not only with Brian Roberts of Comcast, as you astutely point out, OG, but also with Ike Perlmutter, which, they actually do make reference several times in this presentation that they gave here on Tuesday, saying that there were associations there that people should probably be informed about, and rightfully so. And I think that's why also too they spent a lot of this time defending Iger, which was really, really interesting in his performance and so forth, because again, Trian's position is that you don't get rid of him. So it's kind of interesting how they would spend the majority of their presentation defending Iger and his business acumen. That's all. That's a decent thing there. Also, too, his other experience in terms of entertainment is with MSG Sports, which we'll get into in a moment. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh God.
Well, I think they're defending Bob Iger is because they can see through kind of the BS a little bit. They know that Peltz isn't being 100% on the up and up with that.
Well, and I think Disney isn't being 100% on the up and up either. I think they're getting close to the edge, but not actually going over it. In saying that this is really about Iger, I think I think they're saying that with Peltz's interest, it's more about Iger than they're letting on, and I think with Peltz himself, it's more about Iger than he's letting on. So it's kind of like this back and forth there. Matthew, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I think it is. I think there is a lot of disingenuousness on both sides.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean it's. I will actually agree with that. I think the characterization from Disney in terms of what Peltz has done, a little bit uncharitable for sure, but also too what Peltz has accused Disney of in several areas, a little bit uncharitable as well. So it's definitely. I mean, we're pointing fingers here. This is their official response, and again, it's going to be up to the shareholders to decide, but. Mr. Peltz thinks Mark Parker and the newly returned Bob Iger are too friendly. And then the company actually says in the actual facts column, Bob Iger and Mark Parker's relationship is purely professional and focused on the Disney board. I don't know. This is...
I agree with you. They're not allowed to be friends. Right? I don't know.
That really does sound quite personal.
It's a little, and this is kind of plays into our argument, right? This is a little bit more personal than anybody's letting on, right? This is a little bit more, you hang out with that friend, you hang out with this guy. And this is kind of high school stuff. So I don't know. I think Peltz is forwarding or positing the notion that that the board have a more adversarial relationship with the CEO. And I can kind of understand that, right?
Yeah,
I think
that's fair.
There were accusations, especially from Susan Arnold and others, that it's like we went along maybe too much with Bob Iger. Maybe we should have just checked them a little bit, and they didn't. And maybe that's one of the reasons why we're in this position to begin with. At the same time, too, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with Parker and Iger being,
like friendly.
Yeah, friendly. I'm not sure. If that's too much an issue, but Disney makes it an issue in including them in this graph here.
Yeah, that's true. And then so Nelson Peltz is claiming, quote, they offered me a board observer yesterday, end quote. Disney's response is Disney offered Peltz an information sharing agreement whereby he would meet separately with management and the board once a quarter. Now, this one is interesting to me because it's kind of like it's a semantics game. I mean, they're both saying the same thing, basically. So there's no, Disney didn't really debunk what Nelson claimed. I mean, that's what that is. It's a board observer. So, okay.
Yeah, and I guess they're downplaying what a board observership role is. The way I take it as is that he would sit on these meetings. They're saying that no, he wouldn't. He would meet with them separately. It's like, okay, well, again,
to lessen the blow.
Yeah, exactly, right. Or to kind of argue against what Peltz is forwarding, which is, oh yeah, we were letting up. You know, they Disney were letting me in, and it's like, no, we weren't. We were keeping him. We were keeping him at a distance. Look, the bottom line here is this: when the Trion Group invests $900 million, right? And Peltz is saying that the company is in crisis and that he wants to go ahead and contribute towards correcting course here. He's not doing that for an observership role. You're not investing close to $1 billion in terms of a share acquisition just to just kind of look over from the bleachers and just kind of see how the game is being played. No. Right. You want to contribute actively to that process. So, it's he's not letting up. I'll just put it that way. And this whole thing right here, it's probably the weakest of this whole graph right here, because it's I don't know. I can see why, but it's not going to stop him.
Yeah, 100%. And then so Nelson Peltz is claiming here, quote, if you look at my record, I've never gotten rid of anybody, end quote. Disney is saying probably the most high-profile activist-driven CEO departure of the year involved Nelson Peltz, and ultimately successful behind-the-scenes effort to push GE CEO Jeff Immelt out. Now, this is the issue. This is a massive problem, in my opinion, for Peltz, and it's connected to another one on this list too that we'll get to in a moment. But when you say these kind of definitive statements, I've never, and then Disney can go back and go, well, actually, you did. It chips away at your credibility. Sure. And see, that's an issue, and this other one down here about saying, I'm kind of going a little bit ahead too, just to it kind of connects to this point I'm making. Down below, it says, I have probably served on more boards than anybody that I know. Whatever board it was has outperformed the S&P by 900 BPS annually. And then Disney said, well, actually, you didn't in 2014. See, these little things are it's like chipping away at Peltz's credibility, because it's showing that, like, okay, you're not being 100% upfront. And it's kind of like a relationship. Like, when someone lies to you, it's like, well, even if it's a little lie, like, how do you believe everything else this person's saying, right? So I think Disney, in these 2 points, the last one and the not getting rid of anybody, I think those are actually really strong comebacks, so to speak, retorts, because I think that what that does is it makes Peltz look less credible. He's not being honest about his record. His record is actually really good. He doesn't have to lie about it, and that's the problem,
Yeah, the interview was definitely ill-advised, and I knew there were some problems there too. Apparently, they had problems with the Zoom call and stuff like that. It's like, this does not go well, and they used his words against him. And when you posit affirming statements and statements that can be checked on, like, if you look at my record, I've never gotten rid of anybody. And it's like, oh, well, in 2017, you got rid of this guy. It's like, well, that's not, I mean, especially if Bob Iger contributed to this, which I believe he did, it's like, hey, you got rid of this guy. What are you talking about? I could see where the company might be not only defensive, but on the offense there, and kind of pouncing on that in a way that would discredit Peltz. So I get it. It makes sense there. Shouldn't have said that. That's for sure. But I mean, if it was a decision by which had to be made in order to right that company, then so be it. But to say that you've never done, you've never done something, and obviously you have, not in the win column for sure. Matthew, I think this goes into your skepticism regarding Peltz, right?
Yeah, definitely does.
Yeah. Well, overall, what are your thoughts on this, Matthew? What are you feeling?
I honestly think Disney is probably in the right, if only somewhat more, because they are making genuine efforts to turn things around. They've already thrown out Susan Arnold, and they brought in Mark Parker to bring about more stability. I think we're not going to see results too early on. It'll probably take at least another year or so for the stock price and profits, and for customer goodwill to really materialize again.
Interesting.
On the
What's your assessment, though, OG, and yours as well, Dre?
Go ahead, Dre.
Well, on the Susan Arnold thing, I wanted to go ahead and kind of bring this up here, because that kind of whole thing and how this is intertwined with this is fascinating. Not only did they replace Susan Arnold and her position as chairman of the board, but they've also opted not to, let's say, continue Susan Arnold being on the board, right? Because they could have done that in various ways according to their bylaws. They didn't actually opt for those options. And so she'll be leaving. Not only will she be leaving, though, they'll be getting rid of her seat, which Nelson wanted, knowing that Nelson Peltz was looking to get a seat on that board. So they're going through, I'll read it right here. This is WW Pro on that Park Place with his article on this. Disney releases insulting official statement for Nelson Peltz, and they do. It says this: they've gone to such lengths as to replace the chair of the board of directors and purposely alter the company's structure such that former chair Susan Arnold's position is not just vacated, it's gone completely. That means there's one less seat at the table and may indicate the company is willing to take extreme measures to limit Peltz's ability to get into the boardroom with real board powers. Let's see here. I also wanted to bring up this just real fast. Let's see. Yeah. I believe the NASDAQ actually rates Nelson Peltz, I think, like number 2 on the Tip Ranks Best Hedge Fund Managers list. And so WW Pro says this: when you're rated number 2 in the world, insults from Disney's top brass about your lack of skills may just have the opposite effect. And as we've seen with Peltz's battle with Procter & Gamble over the years, he's unlikely to give up. And insulting his acumen may just harden his desire to force his way onto the board one way or another. So, look, even if he doesn't get the votes, the interesting thing is I think he'll increase his stakeholding in the company. As time goes on. This kind of $900 million in shares that he has now, expect that to increase, even if he doesn't get the actual proxy votes with this vote.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too. Like I said before, he's got a decent record, and that's why these definitive statements, I always, man, if that's not true, and Disney can say, yeah, but that one time, you're it doesn't matter how good your record is. Now he looks like he's being disingenuous, So it's fascinating. But yeah.
Oh, do you want to go into byline 5 right here?
Yeah, I was going to say, let me see, number 5. It says he wanted to meet with the board to present his strategic and operating initiative. Actual facts from Disney says Peltz met with the board on January 10th and presented no strategy, no operating initiative, no new ideas, and no plan. That's actually, I mean, at least from what we're hearing publicly, he hasn't really given a plan except for just get out of streaming altogether if you can't buy back the Hulu Plus. Whatever.
That's obviously the worst thing Disney can do right now.
You think so, Matthew?
Yeah, I really do believe it, because they would lose one of their most important revenue streams. And let's face it, as we discussed in an earlier stream, I think Disney needs streaming.
Yeah. No, yeah, well, yeah, they do. I don't think you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's not profitable today, but that doesn't mean there's not some restructuring formula that can make it profitable. Netflix has been around for a long time. They've proven streaming can be profitable. They were profitable for many years. They've come across some hard times recently, but the company hasn't always been in the red, though. I mean, they've made profits, and it's like there is a formula to be made here. And I think just throwing out it completely isn't the answer, in my opinion. But go ahead, Dre.
Profitable. That's interesting. They've increased shareholder value. I don't know if profitable is a good word here, and the reason why I say this is because you need tens of billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars in order to produce the content necessary in order to get subscribers, which is kind of an interesting thing. I had this pointed out to me, and I just never really thought about it like this, but here we go. I think I think the shareholders and the investment community were kind of stunned by Disney's kind of like, hey, we're going to spend like $30 billion a year just on content. And a lot of that's going towards DTC directly. It's like, yeah, but you spent $70 billion for Fox, with I guess the inclination or the notion that you would take that library, combine it with your own, and now you have just a content repository to bypass the required investment that it would take from any of these other studios for just producing content on their own. It's like, hey, you kind of like, instead of investing into streaming as you go on, you had a big purchase up front. Yeah, I mean, I don't think, and to be honest, I kind of can see this where it's like, I don't think a lot of people anticipated that they would purchase Fox for $70 billion for what they brought to the streaming realm. And a lot of that's Hulu, but a lot of it is not. And then spend $30 billion a year on top of that. I think that was a little like, wow, okay, that's a lot. That's a lot of capital towards that end. So I mean, streaming has to be corrected for sure. And to be honest, we haven't really seen what the strategy is, from Disney's end on that either. Now for Peltz, I'll say this, okay? He was given, I think, 30 minutes via a Zoom call to actually propose what he was going to propose to the board. That doesn't, really provide a lot of time. I mean, we're almost at 30 minutes right here. That doesn't provide a lot of time to actually get towards solutions. However, even in the Restore the Magic campaign and those slides that we actually reviewed in the last video about this, didn't provide much substantial solutions either there. So it is one of those things, and I think this is the most robust argument against Peltz. It's like, okay, yeah, we obviously we're doing things wrong here, but what are we going to actually do about them? And he hasn't posited solutions, at least substantial ones as of yet.
Yeah, and I think Matthew Bellani of Puck News kind of said so much in the CNBC interview where he was like, yeah, Peltz has like a laundry list of problems, at the Walt Disney Company, like making streaming profitable and what have you, but not a whole lot of solutions. It's like Bob Iger already knows the problems. He's aware streaming profitability is an issue, but what does Peltz bring to the table? Does he have the solution to that? Or, lifting the problems isn't enough. You got to have solutions too if you're going to be part of the board, I think,
You're correct. Yeah, you definitely have to have solutions, and Disney makes the case that we're already doing a lot of those things. In fact, they actually have in their slideshow right here. I think they have what they're actually doing. Let me see if I can actually pull that up here. Board is overseeing key strategic changes that management is currently implementing. So part of that is, they have kind of like 4 points here: structure, reorganizing leadership structure to put more decision-making back in the hands of creative teams. We saw and heard that immediately with the Disney Media and Entertainment Group. I think it's what that division was, but we saw that early on. That's why they got rid of Kareem Daniel and so forth. The cost plan, implementing cost reduction plan, and streamlining our organizational structure to enhance productivity. Okay, yes, you've said you're going to do that, but we haven't seen how they're going to do that, so that's very interesting. Streaming, prioritizing streaming profitability in order, in addition to revenue and subscriber growth, something that Chapek was actually doing. And then Parks, improving the guest experience by providing more value and flexibility. Okay.
That's something they're only just starting to do now, because we've already seen them bring in that free parking and housekeeping at Walt Disney World.
Yes.
It is a step in the right direction, but that begs the question of how much further they're actually going to go on it.
Well, yeah,
very true.
That's true, Matthew. And here's the other thing too, and I think this is a valid point to be made. Bob Iger's only been in there a couple of months, and these are very big issues on his plate. Mm-hmm. Is it fair for Nelson Peltz to come in and be like, well, what have you done, Iger? Like, for example, it'd be like, DC just gave James Gunn the keys to the DC franchise. it would be unfair for some outsider to go, I need to come in and fix DC right now. Well, you haven't even give James Gunn a chance to do anything. It's only been a few months that he's been in the position. I think there's a case to be made here that we don't even know Iger's plan yet, and Peltz is coming in saying it's not good enough. Well, we don't know how he's going to restart. He hasn't made any real announcements. We had some stuff dwindle, kind of trickling in about the parks, but he hasn't made any formal decisions on the streaming yet or any of that. So how do we know it's a bad idea until he's announced it?
True. And honestly, I think the timeline is interesting that they include this, Disney does, because we can see that Peltz was making such efforts to actually get onto the board as early as July of 2022, while Bob Chapek and Peltz were in Disneyland Paris, which is very, 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 very interesting. Remember, we heard some things about that regarding Kareem Daniel and the strategy going forward and so forth. It seems to me, OG, to your point about Iger and just getting in there recently and making these changes, is it quite fair for Peltz to actually come in and kind of harp on these changes when he just started? No, it doesn't make sense. It does make sense if you address this kind of timeline issue that he started these efforts in July, because he's thinking Chapek is going to be on. Obviously,
Right.
the board, the board gave their.
It isn't even giving them a chance to fix anything.
Well, yeah, but he made these efforts when Chapek was in the seat. I don't think he realized that Iger was going to be back in this seat in November, and so he had to switch tact at last minute based on these changes, and that's kind of I think where a lot of that restored the magic. Like it's like, well, he just came in there, but yet you're making these arguments. I think these were arguments posited as part of the Chapek regime,
Right.
and then kind of molded for the Iger regime because it happened so last minute. And to
Right.
your point, OG, I think that is a fundamental flaw here in that the what Disney's going through right now in terms of their changes. I mean, they just happened. So and that's why I think the company responded thusly, like, hey, we're already making these changes. Like, why are you we don't have to have these things pointed out to us. But to Matthew's point, it's like, yeah, but you could have made some of these changes before you chose not to. And in terms of like the parks and so forth, you may have depreciated the brand in doing that. So it's an interesting kind of thing there.
Yeah, no.
I think though you can put most of the blame for that on Chapek. Or do you think some of the blame still falls on Iger's shoulders?
Yeah, and I'd also, to be fair, completely, I'd also put a lot of blame on that. Like, hey, look, they had an issue in which they had cash flow problems. They had to get rid of their employee base, stop their dividend, right? And then you had to open the parks back up with a limited set of employees to actually make that happen, right? So how do you control that demand? That's when they started instituting all these different changes in order to, in order to control that demand with the supply that they had, that they could actually offer to guests, right? And so now that we're starting to come out of that, now that demand is starting to change, we're seeing these changes actually happen. So it's interesting. I think if Nelson had done this even like 3 months ago, I think that would have been a completely different equation. I think he's a little bit behind on this one.
Yeah, I think it would have been more successful if Chapek was still CEO. There was definitely more of a fervor, more of a hunger for like drastic change at Disney when Chapek was there. The industry didn't like him. The park people didn't like him. I mean, I think if you would have done this months ago, I think it would have gained a lot more traction. I think that bringing Iger on kind of put a little bit of a wrench in the gears for him.
A little bit of wrench to the gears, especially now that we're seeing Mark Parker be put in his position and so forth. We're already seeing announcements being made even before this. This is a very interesting kind of thing here. Also, too, I think the announcements that were made on the park side and so forth. Remember, they preceded Peltz's announcement like by days. That may have been part of the strategy and so forth.
Yes.
Right? But I think you make a great point here, OG. If he would have levied this kind of proxy war while Chapek was in the seat, he might have been championed by the media.
Right.
But
and chances are we might have been more successful.
of course,
absolutely.
yeah. But and that's because JPEG was the mud monster, right?
Right.
Well, now with Iger back in play and all of the kind of associations that Nelson Peltz has being brought to light, there is definitely, I would think, he will have a more a difficult time, I think, positing his potential solutions or his proxy effort than he would have had JPEG been there.
Yeah, 100%. And the last and final point here, Nelson Peltz claims, quote, "I have probably served on more boards than anybody that I know. Whatever board it was has outperformed the S&P by 900 BPS annually." Disney's response is, at a minimum, the MSG Sports Board, which Peltz has served on since 2014, has not outperformed the S&P by 900 BPS annually. See, and this is what I was talking about earlier with Peltz has to be very careful. Peltz is kind of making kind of Chapek-y like gaffes in a way where he's being easily fact checked by Disney, and it's chipping away at the credibility. He doesn't have a bad record. We saw with our friend Pro on that Park Place. He's ranked number 2. So the dude has a solid record. You don't need to exaggerate or to make yourself look good. You already have the good record. But when you do this with the always and the nevers, and then it's not always or never, it's just it kills your whole argument in a way. Your credibility is down the drain. So
go ahead.
No, I was just saying it is just not. He's not doing himself any favors. Basically, is what I'm trying to say.
No, he isn't.
No, I mean, if you could show my screen real fast here. Look, I'll go over Disney's point and then I'll circle back here. Them pointing out the one company that didn't succeed the S&P 500 out of the numerous companies that he's been involved with, and the brands that you see on screen right here. I don't know. It's a little like, oh, we found the one. You see, we found the one where he didn't outperform, and it's like, right, okay. Now, should Peltz have said that, where it's like, oh, all my companies go over? It's like, yeah, but remember, these are sales guys in the financial world. This is selling yourself. It's kind of what you do, but yeah, I mean, I would have had like maybe a qualifier in there saying, most of my companies, the overwhelming majority of my companies have superseded the S&P 500. That is a kind of a better way to actually say that, rather than just like, oh, all of them. It's like, well, no. So it's a little, it's that kind of back and forth that we talked about earlier. Interesting too. I heard something interesting here. Jonas, as part of the crew over there at that Park Place, actually came across some interesting information regarding the Wendy's company. They're saying, I guess Wendy's is advocating maybe for, or at least senior leadership there is advocating for Treon just to buy it outright, because they really do believe in what Nelson Peltz actually did for them. So it's a kind of it's one more feather in the cap there. But again, a media company, and I didn't really make this point on the previous video. I want to go ahead and make this point now. He doesn't have a lot of media experience. That's just the bottom line here. Now, I understand that a lot of Disney doesn't necessarily have to deal with media and entertainment exclusively. There's a lot of products and services that they offer. Absolutely. But again, that's kind of the Chapek-ian mindset, right? Where it's like, we're making widgets, and it's like, we're not there. It's not just about business. It's about show as well. And Iger obviously has a much deeper understanding than that I think Peltz or even Chapek did, for sure. The question, though, is the industry is rapidly, it's changing, or it has changed substantially since even Iger was sitting in the seat 2 years ago. Or I should say 3 years ago now. It's right about 3 years. Crazy. 3 years ago now. And so will he be successful in this gambit? I'm not sure. Now, Disney goes on in their presentation talking about, Fox could have, it could have wound up in other hands here. We've been able to turn around Fox. It's interesting if you look at their presentation, they look at how much valuation Fox has actually brought to the company. Let's see right here. And it's like, look, we got The Simpsons, we got Family Guy, 400 episodes, and it's like, yes, but the fact still remains isn't that
they've hardly utilized Fox at all.
Right? Simpsons does not equate $70 billion. Family Guy, Modern Family, Deadpool, Fantastic Four. The episode 4 writes, I get the valuation that Fox brings as part of an acquisition is $70 billion worth. Right. No, it's probably around $30 billion, which is why the initial offer was for $35 billion. I think that was an appropriate assessment. The fact that they paid so much, though, and then for Iger just to say, hey, I bought it, bye. That hurts credibility as well. 100%.
And we've been very critical on this channel about the Fox purchase. I still think he overpaid for it. Now, Disney addressed that, and I want to bring this up real quick. And I thought it was an interesting point on Disney's part, actually. They say here, and this is Hollywood Reporter, by the way. I'll link it down below. But it says here, Disney's board also pushed back on Peltz's criticism of Iger, noting that during the course of Iger's entire run as CEO of Disney, the company significantly outperformed its peers and the S&P 500. Disney also argued that Iger's major acquisitions were labeled as being too expensive when the company completed them, only for it to be proven right later on. And that's actually very true. It's actually interesting, too. When Bob Iger came on, it was right after the Pixar deal, right? When Bob Iger came on.
Right before the Pixar deal, because he made that happen.
Well, yeah, no, but in this particular case, right after the deal, Bob Iger was seen. Bob Iger was he made an appearance on a show on CNBC right after the Pixar deal, and it was a show that Michael Eisner was the host of. I don't know if you guys remember this. He had a short stint on CNBC, and he interviewed Bob Iger. And Michael Eisner told Bob Iger to his face in that interview right after the Pixar purchase that, in my opinion, Iger, I think you overpaid for Pixar. Even Eisner was saying, I thought you overpaid. And history was kind to Bob Iger. Turned out he really didn't. But Disney's kind of right on that. A lot of these acquisitions, they were kind of panned as like, oh, they're a little pricey, and then it did work out. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen with Fox. Fox is a whole other animal. $70 billion is a whole lot, but they do have a point there.
Yeah, no, and Michael Eisner, he was definitely wrong for that. And the reason why is because he was having a big feud with Pixar at the time, and it was getting very personal. And let's just say that Michael Eisner's eccentricities were not a good mix for finding a kind of a constructive relationship going forward with Pixar, right? And so you kind of needed that outside presence to kind of go, hey, reassess the situation, see the value of what Pixar would have brought if integrated into Disney, and a creative visionary to really kind of leverage the power of Pixar and use it to fuel Disney's creative efforts going forward, which Iger, to his credit, brilliantly did. They also, in this presentation, they say, hey, look, listen, this is Iger's performance as compared to the S&P 500, and they are exactly correct. And you got a line here, and you got an S&P index here. Like, they overperformed, right? And it's not about what you did before; it's about what have you done for me lately. And I think that's also a part of this equation. Also, too, Fox. It's like that. It hasn't been, I think, leveraged effectively as maybe Pixar or Marvel was, and
sure.
You can add in Star Wars too. Let's be honest.
Yeah, or even core Disney.
Yeah, core Disney. Matthew, you want to go ahead and expand on this point here?
Yeah, there's a lot of and I don't want to say this for Disney, but streaming is a problem now for every company. Do you mind if I share my screen?
Oh, sure, absolutely, Matthew. Yeah, go ahead.
How do I do that? Sorry, how do I do that? I don't think I've ever done it before.
Oh, how do you do that? Okay, so at the bottom of your screen here, it's share screen right there. Then share screen, and then I think you have a couple of options, share window and so forth. You can either share your entire screen or share a window from there. It's pretty easy.
There we go.
Yeah, so I've actually found this article called "Every 20th Century Studios and Searchlight Pictures film coming out in 2023,"
Right.
and I'm gonna have to scroll through this slowly. But as you can see, there isn't a great deal on here either.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, is it necessarily $70 billion worth of an annual
No.
slate? It's
No.
and these are kind of smaller films, so
Yeah.
it's or a lot of them are. I mean, Avatar is a major one. Let's be honest here, but a lot of them are kind of smaller films, and it's like, are we leveraging this brand to the best of our abilities? I think everybody
No, we're
can
not.
see no.
Right.
And again,
Yeah.
Iger, when he made this acquisition and could have leveraged it, he left. So it's like, okay, I can see why, even if Peltz didn't have any association with Perlmutter or any of his guys and Brian Roberts from Comcast, I can see why. And even I was, to a certain degree, when Iger came back in, a little bit skeptical this time. A little bit like, it's so convenient for you to step out when times get really, really tough, and then step back in when things are kind of a little bit more, stable in terms of in terms of the factory and operations. Not saying the stock price, just the factory. So
Yeah.
I
Fair.
don't know. It's an interesting thing. Will his proxy effort be successful? And just to outline for everybody, basically what this proxy war is all about is he's attempting to get the shares of shareholders, their votes connecting to those shares. He's attempting for them to sign off on a proxy vote in both their interests and his interests. That's what this is all about. So basically, I want to vote on your shares is the call to shareholders. And I don't know if he'll actually get that proxy vote, but it's going to be up to the shareholders, and we should know. I mean, I think they have the shareholders meeting in March, and then the quarterly earnings report is on February 8th. So we should know a lot more by the time that shareholders meeting actually takes place.
Yeah, and just to kind of we're going to wrap it up, but my overall thoughts on Peltz is I'm not adverse to outsiders coming in and having kind of a, kind of a little friction on the board, right? I think that's good. I think that's healthy for the board to have that friction. I'm just not 100% sold on Peltz in particular. There are a lot of red flags for me, especially after learning about the Ike Perlmutter stuff. I don't know. There's a lot here, and we'll see. And he might be fantastic, like you said, Dre. To be fair to Peltz, Wendy's is vouching for him, right? Like the Italian mob. I vouch for you. No, but
Yeah,
they're vouching.
He's a good guy. Come on, let him on. Let him on.
No, but I mean, he has a good track record. To be fair, I'm just motivations and all that. I'm not really 100% on him, but I definitely do think this idea of someone coming on and kind of rocking the boat a little bit is not necessarily a bad idea. Just not sold on him in particular. But Matthew, any final thoughts before we close it out today, sir?
Please.
I would just like to say, I think Peltz probably isn't the best bet, but I'm sure there is probably someone out there like him who might be able to provide a little more of that pressure. And I know this is a very, very serious question, but I just want to ask both of you, how worried are you for the Walt Disney Company? Do you think they will ever be able to get out of its mess, or do you think they will just stay in a stagnant state? I know that's an extremely tough question because, as you keep saying, OG, Disney, as bad as this situation might be, has been through far worse than this before.
I think they're going to be fine. I honestly, I think that sometimes you have to crack a few eggs to make an omelet. Sometimes the transitionary periods are messy. When I redid my studio, this room was a disaster in the midst of reorganizing everything. But then at the end, it turned out really fantastic, right? Sometimes you have to make a mess to improve something, right? And we see this very often at the Walt Disney Company. Like Dre and I, we talked about it. Every 20 years, pretty much, there is this kind of like upheaval, right? And they always come out of it at the end a better company. I'm confident, I'm optimistic that that's going to be the case here. And look, I could be, being a little too Pollyanna-ish. Maybe it won't. Maybe they'll be bought out. Maybe they'll be split off into multiple companies. That's a possibility. I'm not saying that's impossible, but my gut is telling me there's a lot of drama right now. We're cracking a lot of eggs, but at the end of the day, we're gonna have a beautiful, delicious omelet, and it's gonna be okay. That's my opinion. Dre, final thoughts. What do you think about Matthew's question?
I'm a little less optimistic than you are, OG. I think they're at a crossroads here. They're at a crossroads. This thing could go south real quick. Okay. I do think Iger being brought back is a net gain overall, right? I think he does add stability to this equation, which the board and the company desperately needs. And I think that the board views Nelson Peltz and what he's doing right here as a potentially destabilizing force. And I do believe that assessment is correct.
Yeah.
Whether he'll be successful, I'm not sure. If nothing else, though, I do like how Nelson Peltz aired out dirty laundry a little bit for everybody to see at least, and really kind of forced the board's hand to kind of, do something about it. So I think that's a good thing for fans and the company itself, because those things need to be addressed, and this just ensures that they will actually address them. So the court of public opinion, I think it was a good move, at least for us sitting back and watching this whole thing unfold. In terms of my, the company, real quickly. Look, I think the biggest problem right now facing the company is definitely the streaming battle, advertising revenue, and their creative. Streaming battle, we know that all too well. We talked about it this whole time. I won't go over that again. But on the latter 2 points here, advertising revenue, we definitely got some macroeconomic factors at play here. We're going to see some headwinds. Can the company actually be profitable in this environment? We'll see. It's a big maybe, though. I'm really interested to see what those Q4 numbers actually look like is it Q4 or is it Q3? Yeah, I think Q1 numbers on February 8th. Going to be interesting to see how those actually shape out. And then 3, the creative. A lot of people aren't talking about this, but the creative at Disney is a little shaky right now. We've seen some projects, that are very well received get no traction, and we've seen some really bad blunders. I mean, the last 3 animated films have been particularly bad. It just in terms of box office performance and all that. Encanto obviously is successful on its own, but the latter 2, not so much. So that is my biggest fear. Is before Iger could, he could leverage the sleeping beauty, right, that existed, and kind of fuel that towards the company's success and just kind of give them more money and go. This is not where the company is right now. A lot of the people that made that first Iger reign are gone now. So it's like, what's going to happen going forward, I think, is the big question.
Yeah, 100%. A fascinating conversation. This story is far from over. We're going to hear a lot from Peltz. He might ultimately be successful. He might ultimately be a permanent fixture in our conversations about Disney. He might win that seat on the board. We'll never know. I mean, we will know, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see. But I want to thank you, gentlemen, so much for coming on. I'll start with Mr. Matthew Murr, all the way from the UK. Matthew, thank you so much, brother. Again, everybody at home,
Absolutely.
I will link his Twitter in the show notes down below. Matthew, any final thoughts before we go today, sir?
I will just say, eat the fate eighth up, but Disney will eventually emerge from this. It's happened twice already.
Oh, yes.
Yep, absolutely. And Mr. Vash Sky, if you can let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media.
Best place to find me is going to be at Vash Sky right down here. Type it in, should pop up. All the robust discussion. If you want to see me, like, subscribe to this YouTube channel. That's where you can see me freshly squeezed. You search for Juice News and Info, squeezed fresh straight from the Grove. And yes, definitely comment on this video, share this video, like this video. It all helps us out. Thank you so much for your guys' support.
Absolutely. And everybody at home, comment down below with all your thoughts on this proxy battle. Nelson Peltz, Bob Iger, Susan Arnold, all the moving parts. What are your feelings and thoughts on it? Do you think Disney will emerge from this pretty unscathed, or do you think it's going to be not so good for them? Love to hear from you. Thank you all so much for all your support, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.